You came from Worksafe. What brought you to the EPA?
Yeah, look, I'd spent 8 years at Worksafe. That was my first major role in government and my first work in a regulatory agency. That was really a fantastic experience for me. We were able to do extraordinary things, save a lot of lives, spare a lot of pain, and it taught me a lot about what you can do with that sort of organisation. But 8 years on, I felt it was time for someone else to have a go. And simultaneously with that, it just seemed to me that the environment is the issue of our time. And unlike safety, which is a discipline which is about 200 years old, the environment, by comparison, is around 40 years old. And the big questions and importantly the big answers, I think will unfold over the next 10 years. And I wanted to be, basically how I thought, am I going to sit there and read about this for the next 10 years or am I going to be a part of it? And I do believe that a properly working regulatory agency is part of those answers or finding those answers. So the chance came up to be here and I jumped at it really.
Surely you would have seen the reports into the EPA before you took on the role of Chief Executive, which showed the organisation was in a bit of a pickle.
Well, to be fair, Worksafe had been in a pickle as well.
Yeah, you're credited for turning that around.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm not unfamiliar with how public organisations can lose the confidence of the public. And once you do that, then you lose all of your authority. So I'm not daunted by that. I think to be honest, I think I sometimes am daunted by the challenges of the environment. Every problem that we deal with has no easy answer. Many of them don't have any answer at all, from what I've seen. But for an EPA, unfortunately, you've got to make decisions and keep moving. You can't wait for those answers to emerge. You've got to make your best call. So, yeah, look, it's an enormous challenge. But, you know, I mean, I think the environment's worth it.
Looking at how they were kind of disposed before you got here, and I particularly remember when you were in the rooms where you had the last conference and you had the big graphic up on how their sort of tendency is sort of to shift away problems and their work morale. Did you look at that along with all the other problems that the EPA has been having, you know, that are quite clearly documented and some not so much, and think, oh my God, what have I got to deal with?
Oh, well, I think they're common problems though. They're not, we haven't got a monopoly on being an organisation which faces a huge magnitude of problems and lacking in confidence to be able to deal with them. I mean, that's a common scenario in organisations, particularly in government or social good organisations. I mean, that's a normal scenario. So I'm not overly daunted by it. Again, I've experienced that before. I think it weighs really heavily in these sort of organisations because people come here either for the general public service to serve the public and or a great deal of passion and conviction about the environment. So my experience is if you don't convert all of that passion and conviction into result, into improvement, it's very unhealthy. So my job is simply to, I often get criticised. People say to me, look, one of the things that really annoys me about the EPA is the turnover of staff. You know, each time someone comes to their workplace, it's a different person and they're relatively inexperienced. And I say, well, that is a real problem. My hypothesis is they come here to make a difference, realise they can't and then leave. My job is quite simply to make sure when they come here to make a difference, they do make a difference. And I believe that I can help them make a difference.
How did you go about fixing the culture in the EPA? We've heard that a few heads rolled.
There was a bit of turnover at the top. It's quite an historical change in the sense that the organisation's been around for 40 years. This 2011 is our 40th year. And when my predecessor left, the government took a decision to split that role and have an independent chair, and then for the chair to appoint a chief executive, which is me. So from that, a number of opportunities arose to put in place a different leadership group, and that's what we've done.
Is it true that 9 of the former managers were replaced?
I don't know that it's 9, but certainly in the executive management team, myself and those people that report to me, only one of those was here before April of last year.
What were the previous staff doing that was acknowledged as a shortcoming?
Oh, I think we've been lucky. We've had 2 major inquiries or investigations, one by the Ombudsman in the aftermath of the Brooklyn Greens estate, and the other by the Auditor General into our management of hazardous waste. I mean, they've been quite specific about our shortcomings.
Right down to your information systems, I saw.
Oh yes, no, they've had a field day with our information systems, and our information systems are not adequate. But moreover, they've been critical of really our preparedness to do our core role to a level of energy that the community would expect. And that's a fundamental criticism of leadership, obviously, because within the organisation there are people who do see issues and they have been reluctant to raise them, and we're trying to make sure that they are supported in raising them and that they're dealt with. So, you know, we've not been energetic enough in discharging our core role. And, you know, you can call that confidence or other things. There's reasons why we've been a bit reluctant, but nevertheless we have to get back on our bike and do our fundamental job. I ask organisations that we deal with repeatedly over the last 12 months, what do you want from the EPA? The most common answer is just do your job as the environmental regulator. Because if you don't do your job, we can't do ours, whether we're a non-government organisation or a community group, or even actually a really high-performing business, particularly one with multi-state operations or international operations who wants to turn a good margin doing good work here. Well, they can't do that work unless you've got a high-performing regulatory system that sets a bar that ensures that good businesses can do good work and turn a good margin. So my job is to make sure we do our job.
I remember you saying in the first of these meetings that I attended that the EPA was having a bit of trouble distinguishing exactly what its job was, and that's why a lot of its problems have arisen. So what do you kind of envisage for the EPA?
Well, and there's a good reason for that, because this EPA, in fact EPAs around the world, were born in the context of very overt pollution events. If you look out the window today and look at the air quality today, this organisation was born in a period of smog, where the river was a smelling death, where the bay, as a result, was severely polluted, and that was the case all around the world. So there was a very easy sort of role: clean it up. We were the pollution solution, if you like. And EPAs have been really successful in doing that. You know, they have dealt with what we call point source pollution quite effectively. The problem now is that we face much bigger, much more complex challenges around, under the guise of climate change, population growth, which are much more complex. And organisations are having to reinvent themselves and say, well, what is our role in the context of that problem? And how do you apply that regulatory function to working in partnership with all the other bits of government and community and business who've got a role as well? So, it is really important that we be much clearer about, well, what's our job?
So what's your plan of action?
Well, we've been very clear, both inside and outside, that we do see our first and foremost role as the environmental regulator.
What does that mean?
Well, there is an act. There's a law out there that sets certain expectations on businesses and provides certain rights to the community. And there are regulations that hang off that set standards and performance. Our job is to make sure that those standards are met. So we have both a role to ensure that there's compliance, and then secondly, our laws are quite complex, and many of those standards are a challenge to meet. So we've actually got a full-on piece of work to make sure people understand what they're obligations are and get access to the help they need to be able to meet them. So I think that's quite fundamental and quite basic. So we need to make sure that our work is somewhat less reactive, all right? Although there's always going to be an element where the creek is turning white and off we go to fix it. To be able to look at the data which you receive, because we oversee licensed organisations, we've got 530 of those that we licence, and then hundreds of others that we don't licence, but who have an impact on the environment. And to make sure that we are routinely looking at, okay, what is their potential impact on the environment? What's the frequency with which we need to get to those organisations? What's their gap in knowledge? And just go after them and make sure that their impact on the environment is minimised.